I'd like to call the meeting to order on Monday, July 7th at 6 p.m. So will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and an invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stay standing. Heavenly Father, walk in the light of your presence and blessings you have bestowed upon our city. We praise you. We are grateful to the coming together of our community in celebrating the historical adoption of the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July, 1776. We thank you for this political freedom we enjoy in this great country that you helped create. Place a steadfast care over our public safety and our military families serving throughout the world. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, I'm going to need this evening a motion for Councilman Osborne, who will not be in attendance. Do I hear, so I guess I don't have to, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion from Councilman Campbell and a second from Vice Mayor Pizzillo. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. So let's go on to the communication, and our first one is John Safin with the Southwest Valley Chamber of Commerce will give us an update. John? Welcome. It's nice to see you.
Thank you. You also. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend.
We did. We're exhausted, but we did. Thank you.
Well, we're grateful you didn't have to call anybody for bail money. So. Thank you very much for, well, one person left. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to the City Council today. We are certainly grateful for the years of the sport the city has shown us. I personally would like to thank Madam Mayor and the Council for including me very quickly in all the city endeavors. The morning that I learned that I was brought into the Chamber as their new President and CEO, I had my first email from the city on my personal email account from the Economic Development Department, so I was very surprised and pleased with that. We, unfortunately, she's not here, but we thank Councilmember Osborne for the years of service she has done on the board for the Chamber, and welcome Councilmember Wally Campbell to the board at the Chamber. So she wanted to get in the deep end, and we are a fun crowd, so
Good.
lots going on. Excuse me. The last year, our board chairman set out a new mandate for the board and for the chambers to be more relevant to business, and that was the goal for last year that we had set. Over the past year, we had enhanced a number of programs, expanded services to both businesses and the community, and also became more involved with the city. My background for the last 5 years before coming to the Southwest Valley was with an economic development agency, so I had a different perspective on what challenges cities have with both getting new business to come to a city and with retaining it. So that gave us kind of a unique perspective and a unique relationship to build on. Certainly, as I said, grateful for all the attention. Mr. Dahlke, Ms. Wakefield Signs, Mr. Harry Paxton, all very welcoming and very open to building a stronger relationship and taking us all to a new level. In the coming year, our current chairman, Ryan Lance, has set the new standard as the same, continue the progress. We had started building last year more focus on tourism, more interaction with the community, taking it to a different level. And the way I've been referring to it as the evolution of the Chamber of Commerce. Just like anything else, if you don't evolve, you become extinct. And business has certainly been changing over the last several years, as we have all seen. Hopefully in the future it will continue to be better. So that is our hope and our goal. We think that there will be a lot of new programs, new opportunities for the Chamber to work with the city and the entire Southwest Valley community. We do represent all 4 cities in the area, And as I have said a number of times over the past year, we're like a cruise ship. We all have a unique deck, which all 4 cities are on, but if we all stay afloat, we'll all be happier. One of the things that I am also blessed with being part of the chamber is I have a very supportive board of directors. In addition to Councilmember Campbell, I have board members with me today showing their support, and also our college intern from EMCC. She raced back from her vacation to attend her very first city council meeting with us.
Well, welcome. Would you stand, please? I'm going to give you
One of the other things that I have with me is a packet for Madam Mayor, you and the council members, and Mr. Dahlke, to review at your leisure. There's nothing critical in there, just a general update on what has been happening and what will be happening in the future with the chamber. So, and again, I'm looking forward to the future. Now that I'm all grown up at 1 year old with the chamber, I'm hoping that we can keep going forward and move faster on things. I certainly welcome any questions if you have any.
counsel. Any questions? Well, Joe?
I was going to say,
Vice Mayor?
no, I was going to say, I appreciate the efforts of the chamber, and recent weather's getting any miles on that scooter of yours? Just a few?
I've been scooting around, but not too much,
No,
not lately.
Not
No.
lately.
So, but thank you for bringing up my scooter. It's always nice to be recognized
Yes, yes.
as a rider.
Well, John, thank you for coming tonight, and I have to tell you, and we've had this conversation before, I think that it's very important that we have a strong chamber. So, and it's part of our responsibility as a city to help you in ways that we can to continue that it is strong. So I think we're going to all appreciate the briefing that you have in the booklet, and thank you for taking the time, and the staff and everybody to do this, and the board. We know it's hours on your time. Some of your board members are having to put in extra hours, and we appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, now is the time for citizens who would like to address the city council on a non-agenda item. Do we have any cards?
No, Mayor.
All right. Is there anyone that happens to be in the audience that would like to address us? Okay. Well, with that, we're just going to go on to the next. And so could you please, we're on to the consent agenda. Do I have the right page here? Just a moment. I have the wrong page, so let me find it. Found it. All right. Will the city clerk please read consent agendas items 6.1 through 6.5 by title only, please?
Item 6.1, approve draft minutes from a regular meeting and a special meeting held on June 9, 2014, and a special meeting held on June 16, 2014. Item 6.2, adopt resolution number 14-1644 to authorize the city manager to execute right of entry agreements with the benefited property owners associated with project number WA 1402, Historic Goodyear Water Line Replacement, Phase 3. Item 6.3, adopt resolution number 14-1643, authorizing the City of Goodyear to execute this First Amendment to the Environmental Access and Remediated Groundwater Reuse Agreement between the City of Goodyear and the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. Item 6.4, adopt resolution number 14-1652, authorizing the city manager or designee to execute the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Goodyear and the Arizona Department of Public Safety to participate in the Gang Intelligence Team Enforcement Mission State Gang Task Force. Item 6.5, adopt resolution number 14-1653, ratifying the submission of the application for Arizona Homeland Security CBRNE Response Team Sustainment Enhancement Grant by the Police Department, and authorize the city manager or designee to execute any and all documents necessary for the award and administration of the grant.
Thank you. Does anyone from the audience wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Does anyone on the council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right, with that then, could I please have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda 6.1 through 6.5?
So moved.
Second.
So I heard a motion from Councilman Stipp and a second by Councilman Holman. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo.
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano.
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp.
Aye.
Councilmember Homan,
Aye.
Mayor Lord,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
All right, let's go to the business agenda on 7.1. And the item is a public hearing considering adopting the proposed pre-treatment fees. So, open public meeting, and Duzak will present. Anna, excuse me.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you tonight is the city's wastewater pretreatment fees. Staff with us tonight from Public Works include Mark Siemens, Environmental Services Manager, Todd Carpenter, Wastewater Superintendent, Linda Shapcott, Environmental Compliance Supervisor, and Don Spencer, Industrial Pretreatment Inspector. A little background on the city's pretreatment program. Since 2010, the city has been working with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality on its pretreatment program. A pretreatment program is required by the EPA, ADEQ, and the Federal Clean Water Act. The city's pretreatment program has been before you a number of times this past year. In February, Mark Siemens presented at a work session on City Code Chapter 12A, and in March, this chapter and revisions to the code were adopted by the Council. Chapter 12A established local limits, created a discharge permit application process, and established enforcement authority for potential violators. The city's pretreatment program is designed to prevent pollutants from entering the sewer system that could cause major disruptions, ensures a higher quality effluent, and it meets the council quality of life goal. The fees listed in the resolution and the attached pretreatment fee cost analysis report were completed by economist.com, the city's consultant with our current utility rate study. To calculate the fees, the consultant interviewed Public Works and Finance Department staff on the work that will go into providing the required services. As far as expertise, our consultant from economist.com, who worked on this report, has more than 20 years' experience advising municipal utilities and national retail customers. And Don Spencer, the city's industrial pretreatment inspector, worked with ADEQ for 26 years. So we had quite a bit of institutional knowledge when putting together the information that's before you tonight. The fees are based on the actual costs required to provide the services, and these fees are only charged to customers who are within the program parameters, request the services, or violate city code. Because the fees are all lumped together in the pretreatment fee cost analysis report that's included in your packets, we've broken them out in the staff report and our presentation based on what types of businesses they'll apply to. To start, pretreatment fees will apply to industrial businesses. The first fee you see on this list, the initial application fee, will be paid by all new industrial businesses. Once industrial businesses complete this initial application, staff will analyze the information provided to determine if certain pretreatment program criteria are met and whether the business will be classified as permitted or non-permitted. If the business is classified as non-permitted, this means they are not a significant or categorical industrial user as determined by city code and the EPA. For these businesses, the annual permitting fee will not apply, and most industrial businesses will fall into this category. If the business is classified as permitted, meaning it is a significant or categorical industrial user according to the city code and EPA, the second fee you see listed, the annual permitting fee, will apply. This fee represents the cost to the city to monitor, inspect, and sample the customer's wastewater discharge each year. Additionally, charges for sampling bottles will be passed through to the customers at cost. The reinspection, permit modification, and permit appeals fees you see listed will be charged as required by staff. It's important to note that all the existing industrial users today will be grandfathered into the pretreatment program and will not need to pay the initial application fee of $775. Public Works staff has already met with all of the city's industrial businesses and is helping them to complete the application and required paperwork. Fees to industrial businesses are proposed to become effective January 1st, 2015. The second category of users in the pretreatment program are the FOG customers. FOG refers to fats, oils, and greases. These fees apply generally to commercial businesses that have a more minimal impact on the city's wastewater system. The focus of this part of the pretreatment program is on preventing buildup and blockages in the city's sewer lines. A few examples of FOG facilities include restaurants, hotel-motel kitchens, school kitchens, bars, coffee shops, car washes, and automotive repair shops. There are currently more than 110 businesses within the city that are expected to be a part of the FOG program. You see there are two fees that apply to FOG customers. All FOG businesses will be charged the annual inspection fee of $160. This fee includes time taken by staff to review the semi-annual reporting and an annual physical inspection of the facilities. The fee will be prorated and charged to FOG customers as a part of their monthly utility bill. The reinspection fee will be charged as required. It's important to note that the requirements for these facilities have not changed in the respect that they've always needed grease traps in place, but their pretreatment program changes the way that businesses are monitored for compliance with the EPA and Clean Water Act. On this slide and the previous slide, you can see that we've listed that all the fees are proposed to become effective on January 1st, 2015. This is a request by our Public Works staff because they'd like to provide greater outreach to the business community, which leads us to our next slide. Community outreach. Our outreach to date, in June 2013, Public Works staff mailed letters to and met with 17 Goodyear industrial users that were identified at that time as potential pretreatment candidates in preparation for the City Code Chapter 12A adoption. This did not include information on the fees, but was to let the potentially impacted industrial businesses know of the code additions. After the adoption of Chapter 12A, and once the proposed pretreatment fees were developed by the consultants, staff posted these fees to the city website and published them in the Southwest Valley Republic per state statute. However, we know that not everyone sees these postings, and we wanted to make sure that the reports, proposed fees, and information on the city's water planning committee were given directly to impacted businesses. So we emailed these postings to more than 170 Goodyear businesses that might be impacted by the pretreatment or FOG fees. Phone calls and emails from about 14 separate businesses were received regarding the email, most of which were questions about what fees would apply to them. One business inquired more about the time and location of the council meeting tonight. Staff followed up with each of these businesses, and the industrial pretreatment inspector made numerous site visits during the last few months to provide information and answer questions. An effective date of January 1st, 2015 will give Public Works staff time to continue to meet with industrial businesses, allow staff to start meeting with and inspecting the FOG businesses prior to when these fees will begin. With the start of the fiscal year 15 budget, Public Works staff will print brochures and informational material for FOG businesses. And the Public Works staff also intends to hold its first annual open house where staff will present information on their pretreatment program, help industrial and customer businesses complete application, and distribute awards. With that, I'm available to answer any questions, and Mark Siemens, Environmental Services Manager, and his staff are here to answer questions you might have as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dezak. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Will the city clerk please read Resolution 14-1649 by title only, please?
Adopt Resolution 14-1649, adopting the proposed pretreatment fees and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Could I please have a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Campbell and a second by Councilman Loretano. Open for council discussion. Councilman Campbell.
Thank you. I have a question. I'd like to know how our fees line up with other cities. Do we have a comparison that you can share with us? From somebody, maybe?
Yeah, okay.
I'm assuming other cities who have water companies, such as we do, they have those fees as well. And I'm just wondering how we are aligned with that.
Councilmember Campbell, Mayor Lord, we don't have that information available tonight, but I will get that for you. That's, right now, economist.com has that information. We just have to get it for you, as far as the comparisons to other cities. That was the question that you asked.
Can I just interject here?
Please do.
I'm not so sure that when we're looking, anything that's connected with this type of, with water or with the care in the city,
Well,
you
it's
know,
the sewer.
the sewer,
Yeah,
but I
it's
mean,
the sewer.
I think what we decided upon as a council, that the industry would pay for itself. Is that with the do you understand that with the,
Yeah.
right? Isn't that what our agreement was, that, what is this?
Cover cost.
That cover cost.
Well, it
So-
shows that we're going to make a little money, and I'm just wondering how we are, if we're aligned. I mean, I don't want to do anything to deter businesses from not wanting to come here because our fees are too high. That's all I'm getting at.
I think industry-wide, they're used to, of these fees. This is not anything unusual for businesses.
That is correct, Mayor.
So, and I think the high ones were mainly on the industrial.
I believe
Is
so.
that correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
I
But I
mean,
would like
I know
to-
what
I would
you, I
like-
see
yeah.
that you'd like to have the comparison. I just,
Yeah,
the
okay.
only thing about a comparison always bothers me, it's like our water rates, okay? Our water
really
rates are
hard to
different than
compare.
other cities. So what, well, our water is more difficult to clean. Our water is, we have some other problems other cities don't have. We compare ourselves to Avondale, we don't have the water problems they have. We have more water problems than they have as far as the water.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay.
So that's all I get. Anna, did you have something you want to add to this after I've opened my mouth?
Yes, Mayor and Council. I know that when we met with our economist.com consultants, the one thing that we did talk about were the fees, and so some cities aren't self-sufficient with their water, wastewater system. They're
We're enterprise business
Right,
here.
And so this was, these fees, we really went through, and the pretreatment inspector sat through and said, okay, this is going to take me this many hours. You can see in the analysis report, they went through and said, okay, this is his rate at this many hours. These are what the supplies he'll need, that kind of thing. So they really went through and tried to map out how much the actual cost would be. So we haven't done, I know that our consultant might have an comparative analysis, but like I said, some aren't self-sufficient.
And I think, and the other thing, to undercost it just to be sure that our numbers aren't higher than another city, I don't know if that's doing our citizens any justice. Because, if you ever walked into a restaurant that didn't have their trap cleaned out, it doesn't smell good. So.
And we did get, with the fog businesses, Mayor and Council, we did get some calls from some of the fog businesses with, some of the McDonald's, one of the McDonald's owners who owns a number of McDonald's, and when they talked with some of the public works staff, they were satisfied with the cost.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
I think when you talked, you certainly have made a community outreach. I mean, you're really working on, and you have a continuation of this outreach. So I think we'll get them. Do you have some comment?
Yeah.
Councilman Holman?
Actually, thank you, Mayor. Actually, that was one of the comments I wanted to make, is that I was really impressed with the varied methods of outreach you used, rather than assuming that putting it in a paper was enough or sending an email was enough, that you really did make a true effort to get to the people, the businesses that would be impacted. And I certainly encourage that and commend you for that.
Thank you, Councilman.
Any other? Councilman Stiff?
And on the quote-unquote profit, the extra money that we're going to make, what happens with that in this enterprise account?
Well, we do have the, Councilmember Stipp, Mayor Lord, we do have the city's industrial pretreatment inspector.
Can you speak up, please?
We do have the city's industrial pretreatment inspector that we hired a year or two ago. So this is to offset some of the costs for that industrial pretreatment inspector that we need for this program for the ADEQ and the Federal Clean Water Act. So we really don't have any.
It's not really a profit in that.
Yes, exactly.
And any additional money that any fees would raise in an enterprise account typically stay in that enterprise account and go toward
Yes.
capital projects, let's say.
I don't know if these would go towards capital projects. Sure, like I said.
Yeah, so what I'm driving at is, this is not a revenue source for the city to
Correct.
quote-unquote fatten its budget.
And in the report, we did list that we decided as a staff we were going to grandfather in the existing businesses, so those existing industrial businesses would not need to pay the $775 initial application fee. And so we did, our revenue is a little bit off. We mentioned that in the fiscal impact in the staff report, but we were a little bit lower than we thought we'd be.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of clarify this whole concept of profit in an enterprise account, so thanks.
Thank you, Bill, for making that so understandable. I appreciate it. Joe? Vice Mayor?
First, I appreciate the presentation, because a lot of the questions, as I was jotting them, you kind of covered as you went through there. But I guess the key question, and again, I appreciate the outreach, because that's how you're going to really get a feel for what's going on. But how often do the businesses typically get inspected? Do they get once a year? Do you get around to everybody once a year? And also, what happens if they're not in compliance?
I will defer to
I think he's coming
Someone
up.
else can speak to that?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Pizzillo and Mayor Lord. The fog customers will get inspected twice a year.
Okay.
And then the pretreatment, the other industrial users will get inspected once a year.
What happens if they're not in compliance?
Then they'll go through that reinspection. We'll initiate the reinspection process with them, and then we'll have to come back out. We'll give them 30 days to comply, and then we come back out and reinspect.
And there's a cost, I assume?
It was listed on the fee.
Okay.
On the table.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, thank you. All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Homan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Great, thank you. All right, let's go to 7.2. It is consider setting the property tax levies for FY 14-15. Larry Lang to present. Hello, Larry.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Tonight is the final stage in the budget process for fiscal year 15. And so we're going to just review briefly what the budget process has been and the proposed fiscal year 14-15 property tax levy and rate, and then just discuss the ordinance before you this evening, ordinance 14-1300, to adopt it. We don't show this chart to cause you aggravation, but it's to let the citizens know just how much time you have spent in this budget process, dating back to the first weekend in November up through tonight. 2 weeks ago, City Council held the public hearing on the property tax levy. And prior to that, the City Council reviewed the budget at various levels. You've adopted the tentative budget, you've adopted the final budget, and under state law, after you adopt the final budget and hold the public hearing on the property tax levy, you have to wait at least 14 days, to come back and actually adopt the tax levy, and that's the purpose of tonight's discussion. So what is the property tax levy proposed in the budget? The total levy proposed both for the primary property tax is $7.4 million. The primary property tax does go to the general fund, the general operating fund of the city, and represents approximately 10% of the general fund revenue for the city. The secondary property tax of $4.5 million is for debt service for general obligation bonds that were paid for by or voted by the public in to be taxed and property tax for it. Those general obligation bonds included there are only for general government purposes. We do have some general obligation bonds for the enterprise funds that you just talked about. Those are not paid for by property tax. They are paid for by the user fees to keep within there. And one thing I want to talk about in this, as we look at the history of the levy going back to fiscal year 10, as we look at the changes in this, there is a 7% change in our total levy. But of that change, the vast majority of that change, or over half of that change in my estimation, and I can't calculate it exactly, is coming from new construction. Land that might have been raw land a year ago that has a building on it for this property tax year. The actual tax rate did drop from $1.90 last year to $1.87. Why do I bring the rate up? Well, the question you had in the public hearing and an email most of you got this past week asked the same question. Wait a minute, if my property values went up by 10%, and then on top of it, you're increasing my primary levy by 2%, doesn't that mean you're paying 12% or you're getting 12%? And the answer to that is no. The 2% that you did on the primary property tax levy is the amount you're limited to by state law. Your property value could have gone up by 50%, and you still would be limited on that primary levy. Because this is the first year since, I believe it was fiscal year 9, the property valuations have increased in total for the city of Goodyear, we were able to drop the property tax rate just a little bit and levy the appropriate amounts of money to meet the general obligation and property tax needs. The impact of this is approximately $38 to a home of median value for the year. And so my recommendation in this is that the council adopt ordinance 14-1300, setting the property tax levy for fiscal year 14-15.
Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? All right, would the city clerk please read an ordinance 14-1300 by title only?
Adopt ordinance 14-1300 levying upon the assessed valuation of the property within the city of Goodyear, subject to primary and secondary taxation, a certain sum upon each $100 of valuation sufficient to raise the amounts estimated to be required in the annual budget for the purpose of paying for various expenses, to raise the amount estimated to be received from other sources of revenues, providing funds for various bond redemptions, for the purpose of paying principal and interest upon bonded indebtedness, all for fiscal year ending the 30th day of June, 2015.
Thank you. Could I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Loretano and a second by Vice Mayor Pizzillo. Open for council discussion. Vice Mayor?
Can you go back one slide, Larry? And it's interesting, you mentioned the email that you received, because apparently there's some information out there, misleading information, because I sat down with an individual the other day who had the same issue. He says, well, if your primary is going up 2% and my assessed valuation jumped up 10, then I'm getting a 12% increase. And I sat down and walked him through to the Excel spreadsheet we have and showed his increase in his assessed valuation and how it went up for primary and explained to him how it's calculated. There's so many variables. First of all, that math doesn't work. Second of all, 2%, if that's the most you're collecting on the prior, you have to look at that pot that makes up that primary. If the commercial is shifting more of the burden to residential, then residential is going to get more of that 2% increase, or whatever that makeup is. You have raw land, you have farmland, you have commercial, et cetera. So the key is some of the things we don't have control over, which is the assessed valuation. But the bottom line, if it's going up 2, that's all we're collecting. Some will get more, some will get less, depending on how your assessed valuation went. One other thing I had mentioned to him, too, is in fiscal year 10, we're still $3 million total below what we were in 9-10, or fiscal year 10. So, again, I appreciate the letter because it helps simplify how it's calculated, because, again, you know, I sat down and then I offered it if you knew anybody else that needed some clarification to show him how his personally was impacted. And I even showed him mine. I got my new assessed valuation. Mine was going to go up more because my actually assessed valuation jumped 20% on the secondary. Go figure, I'm the lucky guy, right? And 10% on the primary. So mine actually went up faster than his did, and I showed him my piece of that pie is going to be larger than his piece of the pie because mine just happened to grow more. So I appreciate how you try to explain it. It's very complicated. It's not simply adding two numbers together to get to it. And the fact that the commercial now is lowering as far as the percentage that is taxable is going to shift more of that burden to residential. That's part of it as well. And depends on, I don't know if commercial is still dropping or rising. I know that they always lagged the residential, so that has a part on how their assessed valuation went overall than the residential. I don't know if you want to add anything on that, but again, I appreciate the letter because, again, apparently there is some information that's misleading out there as far as how it's calculated.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. And as to the commercial valuation, because of the lag, as I recall, for the fiscal year 15, that the actual valuation wasn't growing as rapidly, but it was going to start next year on valuation increases. But of course, new construction is another key part of that you see both in commercial and residential, but there was quite a bit of commercial new construction.
Go ahead.
Do you have the information available in that pot of money as far as the total, assessed valuation out of the, what is it, $600 and some million dollars? What percentage that was last year of residential, commercial, farmland, et cetera, and how that may shift, where that burden may be in this next fiscal year on how that total pot. Do you have that information from the county?
We can get you the historical information. I believe when we get the estimates from the county, in other words, for the future, we don't have it quite at that level that I can
Okay.
break it out between those same categories. We can historically go back and show any shifts in that valuation.
Because that gives you an
as a
idea,
percentage.
that kind of helps us explain too, what's happening on residential, what's happening on commercial, because residential took the dip initially, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And then commercial did, and they kind of followed the leg, so they're picking up on some of it later after the residential, where the residential's picking back up, and the commercials, they seem to lag versus the residential. So there's so many variables that go into this. To simply say it's an addition of two numbers isn't quite accurate, so.
That's correct.
Everybody okay? Yes. Councilman Lortano.
I have to agree with the Vice Mayor. You make it very simple, and if we could just carry you around and have you explain this to everybody, that would be great. And I think we did it last year, put it in the in focus, how to read your
Yeah,
property
yeah,
tax.
I have something to say, but kind of help it a little bit. so.
I just think, because a lot of people then they don't
They don't
understand.
read they don't understand the form.
Yeah, the school district, what comes out of the flood control district, and they just assume they hear taxes from us, they think we're the whole pot. So I don't know if we could put something on the website too that, highlights the different areas again and just kind of keep it out there, because clearly it's, everything Joe just said and you just said isn't getting out there to everybody, so.
I would
One-
like to interject before you go on to this. Everybody, I received this today, okay? And for the public, I want you to open up this envelope. It's a green envelope from the city. And it is City of Goodyear dollar and cents, fiscal management and priorities for 2014 and 15. And in this, actually almost a very large 3-pager, it tells you about the budget, and it tells you about your taxes. It may not go to the degree you're talking about with a copy of their tax bill, but it tells you a great deal. So I am beseeching the public, do not believe the blogs until you have called the city, read this piece of information we're sending you out, or call somebody that can meet with you and tell you exactly what it is. Because misinformation continues to get out into the community. And for some reason, people believe this information is God's truth, and it is not. So I think we've come up with a great solution this year. I think this brochure that's going out to all our residents helps them understand part of what their tax dollars go to into other things. So for staff who, I know you all must have worked together to create this piece, but it is excellent, and thank you.
Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Just to piggyback with what you had mentioned, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, Wynette, is that this is an addition to the in focus that was going to be issued at this time. So what's happening is, instead of the In Focus magazine, this was produced, and this was produced cheaper than the In Focus. So this didn't cost our citizens any additional money as a result of swapping this out for the In Focus. Am I correct on that, Wynette?
It did replace an In Focus that we generally send out, and cost is slightly lower than what we do with the In Focus, because we mail both of them. This costs less to mail, costs slightly less to print. So it was, yes, less than the In Focus.
And my point is, this isn't an addition to our In Focus. This was not an addition.
No,
This
it
was in-
replaced.
Just replaced it, so there was no cost to, no more cost than what we had
Right.
programmed.
yeah, Right.
Any other comments? Okay, are we ready? Let me get down. Oh, okay, just a second, okay. All right, so roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp,
Aye.
Councilmember Homan,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo,
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano,
Aye.
Mayor Lord,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Larry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to the next item, 7.3, to consider approving community funding for FY 14-15. Christy McCurdy. McMurdy. I like to call him McCurdy.
It happens a lot.
Welcome.
Just Miss Ann.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. It's that time of the year again.
Yeah.
We get to give back to our social and community services that we need to help us provide services to our residents. As you may recall, Christina Plant, my colleague, who sat in on this process this year, brought to you an inventory of social services earlier this year just to give you an idea of the breadth of the need in Goodyear and the services that are already out there. And this event, this action that you're going to take this evening complements those services. So we're always happy to bring this action forward. So the applications opened early in May, and we're due at the end of the month. Just so you know, too, I get emails throughout the year and phone calls from agencies that ask about this program, and as soon as I get their contact information, I add them to our distribution list. So anybody that contacts us during the year, when we're ready to open this process, we make sure that they're all contacted, and that was the case this year as well. So it's posted on Facebook, it's on our homepage, we do the email blast, and basically you see that we evaluate our applications based on how many Goodyear residents served. My thanks to Councilmember Campbell, who asked earlier today that we provide a little more focus on that number, and you're going to see that slide added to this presentation as a result of answering that question. Our budget this year is $83,000. Now, that may seem a little low. That is the same budget as last year, with the exception that $39,000 was allocated to the City of Avondale for human and senior services. Normally, they would participate in this process, but because we took care of that IGA just about a month or two ago, that number was deducted from this amount. So we had 21 applications submitted, Health and Human Services again being the focus. These include food banks, victim services, mental and behavioral health, services for children and seniors, and this year we had 2 new applicants. Helping Families in Need, which is a service that's provided out of the First Things First Center in Avondale. They help folks who are applying for assistance from various governmental agencies. And then I don't think I need to tell you what the Homeless Youth Connection does. We're actually real pleased to see that application this year. We've kind of given them a heads up in the past, but I think they have, in addition to their staff, who's going to make a lot of headway in trying to raise funds. Just so you know, too, the total funding requested from the applications submitted this year was $148,500. So the subcommittee had their work cut out for them. That is not too much off from 2013, where we also had 21 applications. That total requested was $218,000. So we continue to hear from our social services that there is definitely a need for our help. This is the chart I referenced based on Councilmember Campbell's question. The first column, and I apologize, I really wanted it to be bigger, but it's such a long list. The first column is Goodyear residents served in 2013. We made sure that the 12-month report for any awardees from last year coincided with the application period this year, so that this information would be available to the subcommittee to evaluate the progress of any awards made last year. Many of these agencies are repeat applications, so it was kind of important to be able to see how they wound up. A few cases, I know for sure Alzheimer's Association, that's a great increase in the number that they expected. And then you'll see in the will serve in 2014, not all of them provided a specific number. We really did tweak the questions this year to try to get that number. In a few cases, it could be that some of these agencies just don't have the ability to project. I'm sure Area Agency on the Aging, the DOVES program, this is a special program that addresses domestic violence for seniors. I can't imagine what they would have to do to try to forecast who they're going to serve. But most of the agencies were able to provide a number. The rest of them basically are saying, we expect that these numbers are going to continue the way they are, or they're going to increase. So that's what we saw with number of residents served. And I think Christina and I have a few other things we want to talk about to maybe hone that number in a little bit more, or maybe drill that question down so we can provide a little better information for the subcommittee next year. So this is our recommendations. Pretty much, it was just difficult to parse out that 83,000. The subcommittee really came through. There was a lot of scrutiny on the funding page of the application, where revenue and expenses are reported by each social service provider. There was a lot of discussion about what these agencies do, whether we are in fact reaching our residents. it's very difficult when it comes down to, okay, what do we have left when we get to the bottom of the list? And how can we best get that money out there? So it's an impressive activity, and I sure wouldn't want to be a member of the subcommittee. So my appreciation to them and all their hard work scrutinizing these applications. And so our action tonight is to ask you to approve the funding allocations for the 2014-15 community funding requests. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? Could I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
The recommendations from the City Council Community Funding Subcommittee, excuse me, FY 24-15. Do I hear a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion from Councilman Holman and a second from Councilman Stipp. Open for council discussion. Vice Mayor?
Just a general comment. If I recall, we left that meeting with trying to get that on our discussion, to try to come up with an overall policy dealing with the community funding. There's going to be a discussion on where we go. Do you recall that, Mr. Stipp? Councilman
Oh,
Stipp?
on the
Yeah. On the funding, on,
future funding?
yes, yes.
And I think we had this conversation last year, if I may, Mayor. I realize it's somewhat out of order, but we had talked last year about looking at making this more of a community-based funding and less of a general funding opportunity. And I think that was reaffirmed again this year in the subcommittee as well, that we start looking at figuring out a way, and it may take us 10 years, it may take us 15 years to get there, but that this becomes funded more by the community and less by the tax base.
Well, just from my perspective, it was to explore that option,
Yeah.
not necessarily to come to that conclusion before we explore
Yeah,
that
I
option.
mean, we got to get there, but
So
that
what
was
does
the
that
question.
mean? I don't understand that at
So
all.
explain to her what they're exploring and who you, to,
It would
yeah,
be-
what you would be exploring.
It would be during our advance, when we have our advance, our strategic advance as a council, to have that as one of the subject matters is, do we want to look at a potential, again, other way of funding
that's right.
this? Or
How
not?
else can you fund it?
Well, that's what the discussion will
I
be.
mean, that's what this is what every city does.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's not what every city
Several
does.
cities use supplement, people can donate an extra $5 on water bills. They can donate to a community fund.
Okay, I'd
that-
like to know what cities those are, but I
It's
agree with
Gilbert, Glendale, those are the two that come, they have the largest programs in the valley. And what we had discussed was bringing that forward at the council retreat to talk about that as a subject
Talk
matter.
about it as a subject matter.
To move forward with that. And what we had talked about last year was looking at doing it. We did not get to it this particular year, and I think Councilmember Pizzillo, Councilmember Osborne, and myself said we need to really get it on the retreat, get it on the radar, let's talk about it and figure it out. Maybe we don't want to do it, but maybe we do.
Talk about it, yeah.
All right, thank you. I think that you all know that that is the time our retreats to discuss these matters and be able to vet them out. And I'm sure that you can let council, let staff know the information that you'd like to have, and they will have it for us before that retreat. All right? Okay. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go to 7.4, to consider a city code amendment for parking. Chief Geyer and Luke Albert will present. Okay, so I've got the wrong name for the presentation, so would you like to say
Good
your
evening,
name?
Mayor Lord, council members, Deputy Chief Paul Marzak with Goodyear Police Department. I'll be presenting sort of a co-effort here with Luke Albert.
Thank
And,
you.
What we'd like to present tonight is an update to articles, to our standing and parking ordinances, and a few others that'll help improve the quality of life for our citizens of Goodyear. Right on the screen there, you have a few of them that we will be going over. Forward ahead. First, I'll turn it over to Luke Albert for this article, which deals with commercial vehicles parking in our city streets.
Mayor Lord, members of the council, we have received feedback from both the North Subdivision's neighborhood and Canyon Trails about commercial vehicle parking on city streets. And in addition, this has also been an issue near the Lifetime Fitness on that private
Absolutely.
road that connects Bullard to McDowell Road. The photograph shown here on the slide is in the North Subdivision's neighborhood on Palo Verde Drive, and where we had actually, commercial vehicles parking on both sides of a residential street, which could even have potential emergency vehicle access restrictions. So this code change would prohibit this type of parking, or certainly significantly limit this type of parking for both commercial and recreational vehicles. The amendment to the code, it will still allow recreational vehicle parking for up to 72 hours as an allowable use, and it also includes allowable provisions for commercial vehicle parking related to construction, loading or unloading activities, or those types of matters. The code change, this next article in the code change will allow the city traffic engineer or the chief of police the power and authority to erect no parking signage for special events in order situations that would improve traffic flow as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Deputy Chief Marzocco.
One thing to add, too, on the recreational vehicle parking, we just want you to know that we're not going to become the RV police. But everyone bringing their RVs, and we're really out there to get the Cousin Eddies that try to park their recreational vehicle there for like 2 weeks. So we just want to get that out to our citizens. So. 13-3-11 provides for the chief of police the authority to use our volunteers for the enforcement program for disabled parking. Right now we're under an authority that we have, but we wanted to make it right in code for them to have this authority. This is a great tool for us. So we're going to get free hours out of our volunteers to enforce disabled parking. This 13-3-14 prohibits the vending of goods from a public right-of-way. Issue is just going to come up this 4th of July. A certain person wanted to put a hot dog stand right at Van Buren Strait Parkway to sell hot dogs while people were going to the fireworks. Well, this law will now prevent that from happening. 13-315 prohibits improper angle of parking, such as the picture you see there, or in cul-de-sacs. A lot of times people in cul-de-sacs will park directly forward in, and so this will prohibit that. State law already says that you need to be 18 inches to the curb, the right-hand side, but this is so we can use our city code for that state law. Now, 13-3-16, loading, unloading a vehicle in a manner that would damage the road surface. What this is for is if we have that new rubberized asphalt that our citizens paid for, if people are taking heavy trucks or taking equipment off of a truck, if they damage the road, they're going to pay for the road. So this is our teeth for that. 13-3-7, we've been seeing a lot in the news media about children being left alone and perishing in a car because of heat. I believe we're one of the first cities to go ahead and go forward with this for a child under the age of 8, that it's now a crime in our city. So if someone calls up and sees a child, we'd have to prove before that either abuse or something, but now this just says if they're 8 years old or under, we can take enforcement action now, which is some good teeth for us. And then just the general updates to codes that we have. Clarifies some things such as increase in some of the fines. We haven't updated them in 5 years. So not all of them are increased, but some of them are slightly increased. And the ability to immobilize or remove a vehicle. What we mean by that, immobilize, I know you're probably thinking we'll put a thing on a car so it can't leave. Maybe in the future as we become a big city, that'll be a great tool. But right now, we don't use that. But if we do have a vehicle that's in the middle of a roadway, we can remove it. And this is a code that gives us that tool. And that's the end of our quick presentation for you, and we'll welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? Would the city clerk please read Resolution 14-1654 by title only, please?
Adopt Resolution Number 14-1654, declaring as a public record that certain document filed with the city clerk titled Amendment to Article 13-3 Parking of Chapter 13 of the Goodyear City Code, providing for penalties, severability, and an effective date.
Thank you. Could I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Stipp and a second by Councilman Loretano. Open for council discussion. Councilman Holman.
I do have a question. There was one particular part in there that will particularly affect me and my parking, in that if there's no handicap parking available, I angle park so that I can use my ramp to get out of my van. And if that's now illegal, what solutions do I have?
Mayor, Lord, Councilwoman Holman, there's a provision that you're there because of your disabled space that you have, and an officer will recognize that, or will recognize that you'll be able to use whatever means necessary to get in and out of your vehicle. And I know that right now the state law says 18 inches from curb, so that's always been there. So this doesn't change that. Common sense goes a long way with this.
Okay, that was my question, because it's either not shop in Goodyear, go to another city who doesn't have that ordinance. I mean, literally.
I think, absolutely, I appreciate you bringing the question up, because somebody else sitting at home listening to this might have the same question, so, but it sounds like you are protected.
And also, when you say you're parking, you're probably in a parking lot, not on the roadway.
Well, that's true.
Right, so.
Any other questions? Well, I just want to comment about the 8 years old and under. Are you going to publicize this a little bit for the people? Because I'm sure there are people that do leave their 8-year-old in the car because they can really contend with rolling down the window and do things. So,
Yes, Mayor, Lord, council members, we will do a media blitz with that and get it out on social media.
I would appreciate that.
And also the website.
And any other thing that just came to mind when you showed us that truck with all the debris on it, you know, our streets are loaded with debris that come from open bed trucks. Mm-hmm. And I would like to really see that happen someday, either at the state level or the city level, that, you know, your open back trucks, you need to contain that, the paper and whatever else you have in it, because you see it strewn all over there. Does the state have a law similar to this on our state roads?
Yes, Mayor, Lord, there already is a statute for that. If you unsecure load or you lose your load, an officer can cite you for that.
All right, I appreciate that information. Thank you. All right, so roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Homan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
So now will the city clerk please read the ordinance 14-1304 by title only?
Adopt ordinance number 14-1304, amending the Goodyear City Code by replacing Article 13-3 Parking of Chapter 13 of the Goodyear City Code in its entirety, providing for penalties, severability, and an effective date.
Could I have a motion, a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion from Vice Mayor Pizzillo and a second from Councilman Stipp. Open for council discussion. All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Homan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I guess I need to check with you if anybody needs a break, or do you want to go through? All right? You're all good? All right, let's go to 7.5. Excuse me. To consider adopting 2 charter amendments. Rorik Massey will present. I'm sorry, I have a puffed up in my mouth and it sort of slipped. Choke. Yeah, choke at the dais.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I do not have anything nearly as interesting as a Cousin Eddie clause this evening.
Yeah, you can't top that. You can't top that.
Might as well just adjourn the meeting at
Yes,
that point. What we have in front of you this evening, though, is an ordinance to refer to the voters of the city of Goodyear two potential charter changes that deal with the issue of consolidated elections. As we're all aware, in 2012, the state legislature passed House Bill 2826, which mandated that all subdivisions of the state, cities, towns, school districts, consolidate all their elections to the fall of even-numbered years, beginning in 2014. As we're aware, we run through our city charter on an election cycle that is in the spring of even-number years, or spring of odd-number years. So we have a conflict with the current state law. We don't have an election schedule for this year because the terms of office of our current city council members have not expired yet. So this issue hasn't hit us as of yet. But we need to look at how to address this issue, and one potential solution is to refer to the voters in the fall in conjunction with the general plan amendment or update the question of whether or not to change our city charter to be in compliance with the state law, which requires elections in the fall of even number of years. This issue is currently in litigation. In Arizona, there's 91 cities and towns that are affected to some extent. The vast majority of them were not on fall of even number year elections cycles. But the vast majority of those cities and towns are not charter cities. They're statutory cities. So they are organized as subdivisions of the state under Arizona statute. So the state legislatures can certainly mandate to those cities and towns how they run their cities. The Arizona Constitution also provides that a city, once it reaches a certain population threshold, can pass a city charter, which becomes the organic law of that city. It's their constitution. So matters that are of purely local control, if it's in your city charter, and as long as it's on an issue of statewide concern, you can have a law that's inconsistent with the state statutes. So there are 19 cities that have charters. Again, there's only 11 of those cities that are not in a fall of even year election cycle. So there's really, when you back away, we're really shrinking down just a number of cities that are charter cities that have been affected by this state law. The cities of Phoenix and Tucson have filed a lawsuit against the state. It's currently working itself through the courts. They won at the Superior Court level. The case is currently pending at the Arizona Court of Appeals. Oral argument was heard in June of this year. The court has not rendered a decision in that matter as of yet. Given summer vacation schedules and the court's schedule as far as releasing opinions, it's highly likely that we may be looking at August, September, even later, before the Court of Appeals renders a decision in that matter. The Superior Court did rule in the favor of the city of Phoenix and the city of Tucson that in this case, this was not an issue of statewide concern, thus the city charter would trump the new state law. But that's an issue at the Superior Court. It's not binding law on any other court in the state. It's not binding on the state legislature at this point until you have a Court of Superior Jurisdiction, an appellate court, render a decision that applies throughout the state. So that's where we're at this point, waiting for a decision by the Arizona Court of Appeals. Given that it'll be August, September before we get a Court of Appeals decision, we're really not going to have any guidance until that time on what the law is. Does it apply to charter cities? There is some previous case law that kind of goes both ways on whether or not elections are an issue of purely local concern. I will say that the Superior Court judge did find that the fact that when the legislature passed this law, they did not put all of the special tasking districts, local fire districts, into the law. They exempted them out. That was the decision maker for the Superior Court judge that, this is clearly not an issue of statewide concern because the legislature did not include every political subdivision in the state. So that's a little guidance, but we don't know what the Court of Appeals is going to do. If the Court of Appeals does render a decision in August or September of this year, it's highly likely that the unsuccessful party will file an appeal to the Arizona Supreme Court. Unlike the Court of Appeals, it's not an appeal as of right. The Supreme Court has the decision on whether or not they accept that case. It certainly is an issue that affects cities other than those two parties. The state of Arizona is a party to the litigation and once that was sued by Phoenix and Tucson. So it is very possible that the Arizona Supreme Court would accept jurisdiction in the matter and hear the appeal from the Court of Appeals decision. If that happens, based upon briefing schedules and the way that cases work their way through the Supreme Court, we're likely looking at March of next year before we get a decision from the Supreme Court and truly know what the status of the law was on whether we can proceed with a March of 2015 election for the city of Goodyear. We have looked at our city charter. It very specifically states when we hold elections at the city level, and that is in spring of odd-numbered years. We've looked at, well, given the uncertainty at this point, what are our options as far as proceeding with an election next year as our city charter requires. One potential obstacle is having someone conduct the election for us. We've looked at whether Maricopa County would run our election. If we still don't have a court decision at that time, would the county run our election for us? And they've indicated, absent a court ruling, they would not run the election. So were there any other options for us? And we did reach out to the city of Phoenix, and it indicates, and they have indicated they would likely run an election for us in March of next year if we wanted to proceed, and legally could proceed at that time. But the cost would be in excess of $300,000, which is more than twice what we normally would pay for an election, or have historically paid to run an election. So at this point, as I've kind of laid out, we're starting to run up against some issues that Phoenix and Tucson don't have, because their election cycle is not till fall of odd numbers years. So the way it's working itself through the courts for them is going to work, because they're going to have a court decision one way or the other, whether the state law applies to them or doesn't apply to them prior to the next time they hold a city council election. But we need to decide what we're going to do at this point. And one option, as I indicated earlier, is to refer to our voters the option of lining up with the consolidated elections bill that the legislature passed in 2012. As I've indicated, the legislature did find that they consolidated elections would encourage voter turnout, save money for all jurisdictions, but it doesn't seem like they thought through all the unintended consequences for the cities that are on these odd election cycles, or odd year election cycles, or even spring of even year election cycles. So again, that's the issue that's presented to us this evening on how to proceed with that. So what we've drafted for you this evening is an ordinance that refers two questions to the voters that be put on the ballot in November of this year. And I'm going to actually recommend that we make an amendment this evening and add a third question, because Councilmember Pizzillo asked a question earlier today, and we need to amend two words elsewhere in the charter. Again, one of those unintended consequences that we have to address because of the state legislature's action. One would shift our election from the spring of odd number years, beginning in 2016, to be in compliance with state law and hold our elections in the fall of even number years. And the language basically says whatever the state statute requires as far as timing, that was in the fall of even years. That's when we would hold our mayor and council elections. The second question, and that would be an amendment to Article 9, Section 5 of the Goodyear Charter, and the language is in your packet. The second question has to deal with calculating the requisite number of votes to be elected out of the primary. As you're aware, and historically, if a candidate receives more than 50% of the votes in a Goodyear City Council election, they're elected at the primary stage and they don't proceed to the general election. And historically, many more times than not, that's actually occurred. The way, if we shift to a fall election schedule, whether it's through the voters approving a charter change or whether it's through the court saying, no, charter cities are bound by state law, we have language in our charter that says that candidate receives the majority of all votes cast in such an election. So now what we're looking at is not just a council election for the city of Goodyear, but if you interpret votes cast at the election, you could logically interpret that to mean votes cast at the entire ballot. So if you interpreted the charter that way, a candidate can never be elected at the primary. So we're just referring an administrative change in the Second Amendment, which is Section 6 of Article 9, which just adds the language of for the subject office. And that clarifies that you're making that calculation based upon the votes cast in the Goodyear election, not the ballot as a whole, if you make that change. The third question that we need to refer to the voters
it's a small change, would be deleting 2 words to clarify when a council member be sworn in, because we actually have language in the charter, as Councilmember Basillo pointed out to me earlier today, that council members could be sworn in June, which actually we changed that a few years back too. So this would be the second time we've amended that section of the charter. But we would need an amendment to also refer the question of amending Article 2, Section 13 of this Goodyear City Charter to strike the words "in June" as far as when council members are sworn in, and to add the words "in the month," which is in the month following a general election. So that would just clarify when a council member is sworn in. So those are the 3 proposed charter amendments to address the issue of consolidated elections and to address the uncertainty that we currently have because of the status of the law and the uncertainty we have on whether or not it applies to charter cities. So with that, I would answer any questions you may have on this issue.
Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? Would the city clerk please read ordinance 14-1303 by title only?
Adopt ordinance 14-1303, proposing and submitting amendments to Article 9, Section 5. Mr. Attorney, would you like me to add in that?
With the amendment
With the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. To Article 9, Section 5, and Article 9, Section 6, Article 2, Section 13, as amended, of the Charter of the City of Goodyear, to the qualified electors of the City of Goodyear, such amendments providing for the changes described herein and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Could I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Loretano and a second by Vice Mayor Pizzillo. Open for council discussion.
I have a question.
Vice Mayor?
Just a general, I think you did a good job of explaining how we got here. But again, this thing's going to be moving on, and typically the election would be March of 15, and you had to give an individual time to collect signatures and et cetera. In November, if you have the election, what if the voters don't want to change?
Well, that's the uncertainty. You would still have, a potential candidate would still have approximately 30 days, because I believe it's December 10th would be the last day to submit packets. So you'd know, most likely you're going to know on November 5th whether or not this matter is going to pass. And if it doesn't, a candidate could start gathering signatures at that point and still have over 30 days to collect signatures. And there's nothing to keep a candidate from collecting signatures in advance of that if they just wanted to be safe.
But the same token, county would not probably hold the election, so we'd have to get somebody else to hold it.
Well, that's going to be the problem is,
That's the double cost.
Yeah.
yeah, you're going to have to, well, at that point, we're going to have to address that. And if the county won't hold the election, we're going to have to find somebody who will hold the election. Likely, the only other party that has that expertise is the city of Phoenix. At that point, we're also probably going to have to file a lawsuit because the cities that have been affected during their election cycle, what has occurred, and that's been Douglas, Winslow, and Prescott to this point. What they've done is they filed lawsuits against the state. The state has stipulated to a stay, so they're not actually litigating the case. The state's just stated, well, we won't enforce at this point until there is a court decision from the Court of Appeals or another court of higher jurisdiction on the case. But most likely, by the time we get to our election date, we're going to have a decision. Problem is, we're going to have a timing issue if we're at this point.
So it all boils down to what the voters want to do when that comes
You
up.
refer the question to the voters and get their direction.
Councilman Campbell.
Well, I have a couple of questions for you, Ulrich. Am I understanding correctly that we will not have a runoff?
No, you would have a runoff if a candidate doesn't receive the majority of all votes cast. What we're clarifying is how you're making that calculation. You could read our charter right now is you're making the calculation of whether a candidate received the majority of votes cast on the entirety of the ballots cast in the election. Now, we're moving to the consolidated election. That could be hundreds of thousands of votes.
All right, I understand that
Yeah.
part. But
So,
what
but
I
we
don't
still would have a
understand
runoff, yes.
is if they're going to charge us to have our election in November,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they're doing, right?
Well,
When would the runoff be?
excuse me, Councilmember Campbell, the only issue we would have in November is whether or not we're changing our charter. So there wouldn't be a runoff on that.
Oh, no. I mean, I don't mean that. I understand that. But I mean,
Oh.
if they prevail, if the law prevails, and we have to do We have to go on the ballot like everyone else. Isn't it in November?
The primary is
The
still in
primary would be in August.
Still in August? so
It'd be in August, then November
would
general.
be our
Right. Correct.
runoff.
Yeah,
Right.
we'd be in an August, November
Right.
schedule.
Okay, and then
Starting-
what happens if the courts sustain Phoenix and Tucson, and it would mean, since we're a charter city, we could be sustained too, and we've already gone to the voters, ask them the question, do we have to do what the voters tell us?
At that point, I mean, that is a possibility. Phoenix and Tucson could prevail on the case. Problem is, we don't know when that's going to happen. It's very possible that could occur in March. Now, if that occurs in March, our voters would have already decided the issue the previous November, so we would have already permanently made our change.
Yeah.
Essentially, we're trapped.
It's a catch-22.
Catch-22.
It's a difficult question. It's just, there's all kinds of timing problems for the city of Goodyear in this one.
Councilman Stipp?
Rourke, if we're going to bring this to the voters, if we get a decision in September or October of this year, there's no way to stop this ballot initiative from moving forward.
We would have already entered the contracts and submitted the ballot language and have issued the publicity pamphlets. I don't know that legally we can remove it at that point. That could happen. Let's just to put the issue out there. We could have a Court of Appeals decision in August or September of this year, and there may not be an appeal. Or there may be a petition to the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court does not accept. But we don't know that. I mean,
Right.
I've discussed the issue with the Phoenix attorneys, and they certainly anticipate that whoever prevails, the other party is going to file an appeal with the Supreme Court. We don't know. So we're trying to plan for eventualities with incomplete information.
So theoretically, there is no going back once this vote is taken tonight.
I would proceed that there is no going back, under the assumption.
And the pamphlets will already have been drawn up, so the pros and cons will already be identified. When is the deadline for that?
Well, we're going to be getting that, Maureen.
The deadline for the publicity pamphlet is August 6th, so I have to get it to the printer by August 8th.
Okay, so theoretically, if the courts turn it over and somebody really wants to push it, they'll encourage our voters to vote no. They'll reject it, we'll stay on our original charter, and we have an election
In March.
primary election in March.
That could happen.
That's the only way to undo what the state is doing, if the voters so feel that way.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Loretano?
And to follow up on Councilman Stipp's question, then I guess if it's a no, let's say they vote no, the public, and I really do like sending it to the public, because I really think we are in a catch-22. I heard it come from that side, because our voters also voted and really liked this idea that the legislature put in. So our voters like it, and they voted for the legislatures that put it in, and I really feel like we're in a catch-22, so I do like referring it to the public. But I guess then, if we get to the position where Councilman Stipp said we ended up with, we don't know what the court's doing, or it may or may not be, who knows what they're going to decide, then we're at the position of finding someone or paying double to run an election.
That's, well, most likely.
So a no could
I mean,
cost us a lot.
You could have, I guess you could have a no and then a court decision saying, charter cities are exempt, and then at that point, we theoretically could get the county to run the election in March.
There's a lot of
It just
ifs
depends on
you're saying.
timing.
There's
So many timing issues with this that,
Yeah. But-
the charter amendments would at least give some certainty, if the voters approved it, as to what your election cycle would be.
And then this would go to the cycle, as Councilmember Campbell was saying, we'd be on the August, November with everybody else.
Starting in 16.
Of 16 of every then 2 years, we just rotate it, and everything would stay the same once we got onto that cycle.
Yeah, and you have to get onto cycle, and every city has had to deal with the issue of what to do with terms. Obviously, the law generally states that you serve until your successor is appointed. There's also some clarifying language in there to state that as well.
Thank you.
Councilman Holman?
Well, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One, I think it's a real leap of faith that any voter thought their legislators was going to put something into place like this that would be this problematic. So I'm not sure that's why they exactly voted for the legislature. But the other comment I was going to make is we're looking at, based on the bid we had, at about $160,000. Is that correct?
Maureen, I think she has that better information on that.
For Maricopa County elections, it costs about $140,000 and that would be for a primary and a general, so it's about $74,000 for each election. The city of Phoenix was charging us $300,000 for just the first election.
Okay, so I just kind of wanted to put it out there what kind of numbers we were talking about, because it is a lot of money, but is it, when you're talking about a principle that is as important as this is? So I just wanted that clarified.
Councilman Campo, do you have anything?
Well, I wanted to ask our city clerk, did Phoenix understand that we are an all-mail ballot, that they're not going to have to open up polls?
Correct.
And
Yes.
they're just going to have to mail the ballot out and count it, and they still wanted 300,000?
Correct.
They wanted
And the
us to
reason
pay for
is-
their election, I think, probably.
The reason is since we're like all by ourselves, then they have to put all their resources into just our city. It's not like they're sharing with other cities at the time, because we'd be by ourselves in the spring election.
Okay.
So that's why it's a little bit more costly.
Well,
One of the many reasons,
right, okay, thanks.
so.
Well, yes, Councilman Loretano.
Well, then will that save money? Because I do remember this when this was going through. There were some people in certain areas that were really trying to say this will save money when this was all going down.
Not going to.
Does it save any money, really?
For the
if we go with
consolidated
everyone?
election?
Yeah.
Well, it does, and I was going to go over that in the next presentation, but since we're on a county ballot for the November election, they only charge us 50 cents a ballot. Compared to when we're all alone, it's $2.12 a ballot. So there is a big cost savings to that.
What a dilemma. And you're right, I don't think they thought this through, or
don't.
they decided that it wasn't important for us to have to, that this is something that we have to do because they ordered us to do it. The one thing that does concern me, and if we vote for this, I want to make sure that we have some kind of program that we notify the snowbirds that they need to contact, in order to get their ballots sent to them when they're not in town, that they have to call the county and request that. Just because they have a mail-in ballot does not mean the ballot will get to them, because there's no
They won't
transfer.
they won't forward it. No.
So I want to make sure that we are proactive on this and have a program that we notify the public that they have to call the county and ask for that ballot to be sent to their temporary address. And then, of course, that means then they'll have to contact them afterwards, to get any other ballots sent back to their house that they need. So,
With that,
yes, Sherry? Councilman Loretano?
And I don't know how they do this, because I just keep thinking of all these different things. Is there anything in place already? Because if we're going on the same schedules like the governor and everything, I would hope there's something we could piggyback on with, if we're going to go on with the bigger races already. Is there
I was told there
anything?
wasn't, but
So there's nothing already out there for the,
no.
Ask her, it's my understanding they will not forward a ballot. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's something that I would need to check on, because I don't think they do.
Yeah.
Like
No, I-
Vice Mayor Pizzillo says, I don't believe that they'll forward it.
They don't.
So that would be something I would have to check with the county on.
I think you're going to find, unless we're wrong, the information that we found out that they will not forward it. And you found the same thing. I
Yeah,
think.
and I'm not sure if it's the reasoning behind that, but if they wouldn't forward it, then maybe somebody would get a ballot that is not them, and they could fill it out and send it in. So, I mean, if you're not the resident of that address, or if you have a forwarding address, whatever the case may be, it's my understanding they don't. I would appreciate you following up on that, but you could ask for a ballot. You could call in and say, I'm in Chicago, all right, and here's my address. You can ask for them to mail it to you, but they won't automatically forward it like a mail forwarding is my understanding.
No, and that was something I would need to check on, if if a citizen did call in and ask to have it forwarded to another state, if they would even do that.
Okay,
I would
that's a
need
good
to check
question.
on that.
Prevent Cousin Eddie from doing your ballot.
Okay, any other questions?
And Madam Mayor, just one other technical point is I
Yeah.
did put an emergency clause in this because we're trying to finalize getting the ballot language to to the state or to the county. We need 6 votes to pass on an emergency clause. So I don't know how the vote's going to go this evening. Could we perhaps take that as a second motion after the main motion? Just
Sure.
make a motion to declare it an emergency. And then if the, technically, I'm not sure it makes a difference, but since we are kind of under some time constraints on getting ballot language put together, and an ordinance typically doesn't become effective for 30 days, if it passes this evening, can we take a second vote on whether or not to declare it an emergency, if that makes any sense?
Okay, Sherry, will you take this second motion we're going to make on this, because we're going to vote on this motion right now.
Vote on the main motion first.
And if you will take be in charge of the motion for the
Declaring emergency.
the emergency, okay? All right, so let's have a roll call for this, please.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Homan?
Sorry.
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
None of us wanted to say aye, you know that. So now we need a motion for the emergency clause. What else do we have to put? Would Councilman Loretano please make that motion?
so move for the emergency clause for the amendments we just passed.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I heard a motion from Councilman Loretano, a second from Councilman Stipp. Open for council discussion.
I'm going to take it now if I can.
Go ahead, the council discussion, go ahead.
I have to just, we have to declare an emergency because the state took action that they did not think all the way through. And we've been waiting for the courts and the system to do what they're supposed to do, which is rule on this. And they're not, and have not taken into consideration charter cities. And much like the state constitution, the city charter is given to us by the citizens, voted on a number of times throughout the course of the life of this city, and they have said time and time again, they want a March election. They had the ability to change this when we did the last charter amendment, which I think was in the early 2000s, about 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's 2004 is my recollection.
Yeah, about 10 years ago. And they opted not to make that change, to leave it in March, because the citizens recognize who our population is. And for the state legislature to take action without considering charter cities is absolutely irresponsible legislation, period. And now we're forced into an emergency situation where we have to decide, and we have to run the risk of a $300,000 election simply because they don't want to listen to the cities. And that is extremely frustrating. The federal government says, Arizona, you must do X, and they don't like it, and they bolster up against it. And the minute that they turn around and do the exact same things to the city, and we want to fight back, we become the enemy. And that's a horrible way to run the state, and I'm extremely disappointed in the legislators that we have and the situation that we're in.
Councilman Loretano?
I don't know how I really follow that diatribe.
I'm going to stand on it.
Yeah, we can give this box over here, but I do agree. I think you said it best. We weren't thrilled with voting for this. When we see all the signage and everything out there, what's going on, but I think, and I have to hand it to this council and you, Mayor, and your leadership, that we have to see that we can't put our citizens in a spot where we're paying more money, that we're throwing good money after bad for something.
I think we said fiscal responsibility.
Yeah,
And that's what we have
and
to do.
that's what honestly it comes down to for me, and elections have consequences, and I do remember there were a couple people, I'm not going to mention which party or who they were, but there were some people who were touting this, and I don't think it was aimed at Goodyear, I think it might have been aimed at some other charter cities perhaps, after some contentious elections, and I don't think that was aimed at us, but I think we got kind of lumped in, and those are those consequences. So when people go to the polls this year, look to see how your legislatures vote and how they look at their cities on this and all these other issues, because we are closest to the people, and I think that our voters need to look and see what their legislatures do and how they represent them and how they deal with their cities in their legislative district. So that's my soapbox.
Well, I'm going to add one more to that before we vote. And this, that I would like as a mayor, for an article to be put out into the public that tells just exactly what this does to our city. So I don't know what the ramifications of that, but I think they need to understand what this means. And so they don't need to be fooled. And if they decide this is what they want to do, so be it. We'll certainly
Spend the money.
But along with that, they have to understand we did this because of the time frame for anybody. And you have to remember, some of the people here at the dais are going to run, but there'll be other people that may want to run in this for this office also, competition. And so it puts them in the same boat of what to do and when to do it. So anyway, that's all it said. So with that, roll call
Could
vote,
I,
please.
please?
Oh, I'm sorry, one more. Councilman
Yeah,
Hill.
I just wanted to say, Bill, I did understand your diatribe if we want to identify it like that. And I would like to affirm that my thoughts run on similar lines.
I thank you very much for that, because I think ours, I felt he made sense in what he said, too, so.
For a change.
Okay, are you surprised, huh?
Doggone, that was hard to say.
See, every now and then. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Homan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
All right, let's go to so now we're going to 7.6. This is item to consider providing notice of the November 4th, 2014 special election. Maureen Scott present. Maureen?
Mayor Lord and council members, the item before you is to provide notice of the City of Goodyear special election for November 4th, 2014, and this election is part of the statewide general election. The 2025 general plan was approved by council on June 23rd, and the next step is to present the plan to the City of Goodyear registered voters for ratification at the November 4th election. And there will also be 3 charter amendments on the ballot. This resolution authorizes the city clerk to contract with the Maricopa County Elections Department and for assistance with the election to include ballot printing and mailing to Goodyear registered voters, and it also includes the tabulation of all the ballots. This resolution also authorizes for a private consultant to print the publicity pamphlet, and that is required for general plan and charter amendments. When coinciding with the county election, the ballot costs are much lower. For the November 4th election, the city will pay 50 cents per ballot, like I said earlier. And right now, there's currently about 35,000 registered voters in Goodyear, so the approximate ballot cost for that election will be $18,000. And the city pays this fee whether or not the voter actually votes their ballot. So one publicity pamphlet goes to every household containing a registered voter, and the cost of the publicity pamphlet will be approximately $15,000, and according to the consultant, they mail out about 23,000 publicity pamphlets. On November 3rd, 2008, Council adopted Resolution 08-1270, and that was to authorize the city clerk to conduct all-mail ballot elections. So the city of Goodyear can proceed with the all-mail ballot process for the November 4th election. A call election notice will be published in the southwest section of the Arizona Republic for 2 consecutive weeks. I'm planning on doing that July 16th and the 23rd. And it will list the dates for holding the special election, as well as information for submitting the arguments for the 2025 general plan election and then the charter amendments. This information will be also available on the website, and the arguments for or against any of the items on the ballot will be due in the clerk's office by 5 p.m. August 6th. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? That's too bad, isn't it? Will the city clerk please read Resolution 14-1650 by title only?
Adopt Resolution Number 14-1650, providing notice of the special election and authorizing the city clerk to enter into any agreements necessary to provide services for the November 4th, 2014 special election for adoption of the 2025 general plan and 3 charter amendments as amended. Initially, it had said 2.
Thank you. Could I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Campbell and a second by Vice Mayor Pizzillo. Open for council discussion. I think we've really discussed it, haven't we, tonight?
sure have.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Disgusted is,
Councilmember Campbell,
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp,
Aye.
Councilmember Holman,
aye.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo,
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano, Mayor Lord,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
All right, the last item on the business, 7.7, to consider amending the user fee schedule to add a ballot argument fee. Maureen Scott to present again.
The next item, again, is to consider the municipal user fee schedule, to amend the municipal user fee schedule by adding this ballot argument fee. With the November 4th special election, citizens have the opportunity to submit ballot arguments for or against the ratification of the general plan and the 3 charter amendments. Most cities charge a fee for citizens to submit these arguments, and as you can see on Elmo, I surveyed quite a few, actually, cities and towns in Arizona, and it was quite interesting. They're really all across the board. Fees range from $0 to $300. Is it?
We don't have it on Elmo.
Screen.
We don't have
Can't
it
see
on our
that?
screens.
Oh, we do.
Is it up there now?
We don't.
Yeah, we do.
We don't.
I don't know why. I guess they don't want the vote. 3 to 3?
Yeah. Well, all right.
Okay.
Just turn around and look.
All right, we'll turn around and look.
And so if you look at the list here, most of the larger cities are charging a lot higher amounts. And the reason is, one of the reasons is because, of course, they have to print a lot more publicity pamphlets. So staff is recommending a $50 ballot argument fee and to be charged for the publicity pamphlet. That's for submission of arguments into the publicity pamphlet. And this would help recoup costs associated with printing and administrative costs. And in order to charge the ballot argument fee, the user fee schedule needs to be amended. And a cost of service study was completed in 2009 and was adopted by City Council on May 10th, 2010. The cost of service study was implemented in accordance with Chapter 20 of the City Code, and at that time, a ballot argument fee was not added to that schedule. Article 20-1 of the City Code permits the council to authorize and enact by resolution all fees and changes to fees for services, permits, or other operations in the city. If approved, this change will be effective July 8th in 2014 in order to be able to charge argument fees for the November 4th special election. The publicity pamphlet is mailed to every household with at least one registered voter, and the Goodyear currently has approximately 35,000 registered voters, like I had mentioned earlier. The cost for approximately 23,000 publicity pamphlets is about $9,200, and the cost for postage, which is current right now, is 27 cents per piece, and that's $6,200. So a total for the publicity pamphlet to mail it and to print it is $15,410. So in addition to printing costs for ballot arguments, there is administrative costs or staff time to review the arguments, to make sure it's in the publicity pamphlet so we can get it ready for the printer. And estimates that I came up with were, and these are just kind of some estimates that I tried to figure out as far as staff time. So I came up with 30 minutes possibly to get it prepared into the publicity pamphlet, and then for staff cost time was $25, so that's kind of how I came to that conclusion. So staff is recommending a $50 ballot argument fee, and that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody like to speak in the audience? All right, will the city clerk please read Resolution 14-1651 by title only?
Adopt resolution number 14-1651, amending municipal user fee schedule by adding number A10 in the Goodyear municipal user fee schedule, adopted by resolution 10-1357 for a ballot argument fee and designating an effective date.
Thank you. Could I have a motion, a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
I had a motion by Vice Mayor Pizzillo and a second by Councilman Campbell. Open for council discussion? Okay. Oh, Councilman Holman.
I just wondered if you did the math, how many arguments would have to be submitted in order to even make a dent in the costs?
Councilmember Holman and Mayor Lord, probably a lot.
No, really, I mean, you said it cost about $15,000?
Correct.
So that would mean we would have to have 3,000? arguments to even make a dent. So I'm not sure that charging is actually going to be effective if that's why we're doing it.
I don't know, why are we doing it?
That's, the staff just discussed it and thought we should at least charge something for it. The county recommends, at least charging $25, but it's not in statute to state a price. Cost, again, it's all over the board. The cities decide what they want to charge. Some cities don't charge anything, so.
City manager?
Yes, Mayor, Council, and that's correct. The other part of that is you really need people to not have everyone to be able to come out of the woodwork, so to speak, that there is a cost involved, so it can be managed. And so we're looking at a reasonable fee, but also one that helps to control the amount of arguments that get out there.
Okay, any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Councilmember Holman?
Aye.
Just the argument.
Vice Mayor Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
Well, thank you very much. Now it's time for council for comments, commendation reports, current events. Who would like to be first? Don't all jump at one time. Okay, well, I'm going for it because I want to compliment staff on the 4th of July celebration.
Oh, yes.
How could you forget
forgot
that?
what we were doing.
It was absolutely outstanding. That day I did 2 TV appearances, plus I felt like I danced all night. So I was exhausted the next day. I don't know about the rest of you, but it was really creative, and it's amazing that when it first started, when we announced it on the field, not many people came up. So some of us went out and talked to people about doing it. Come on, come on. And there were several that said to me, no, 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 no. And it was so interesting because when it got going, they were standing next to me in line, and they were doing it because they saw what fun it was. And everybody was laughing. Families, one lady had a baby carrying it in front of her. They had little toddlers. They had older people. It was just a great combination. It really made it fun for everybody. So my thanks go out to all the work that staff and volunteers did. Any other comments?
Did we break the world record?
Pardon me?
We did.
Did we break the world record?
Unofficially, Mayor, Councilmember Homan, we did break the record. 426 people were in the Soul Train. So they, through all of that, the previous record was actually 291. So we will find out in about 6 weeks for the official ruling, but as of now, we did break, unofficially, we did break the record.
Right.
Congratulations.
And they could have gone on, really, but
yeah,
we
they
had to
would,
kind
yeah.
of cut it off because we had to, the fireworks were on a time. And so we had to get down to business. So anyway, it could have been more, but that'll take something for somebody to break that one, that's quite a number, so I appreciate it. Okay, anything else, City Manager?
Yes, very briefly, I do have some follow-up items and then just a couple of other comments. One is the follow-up items that I got from council tonight was a comparison in the Metro Phoenix area for our pre-treatment fees. Now, understanding that this was driven off of cost recovery, so it's not necessarily apples to apples, but we will look at trying to come up with comparisons of how we stack up. The next item was historical info for the property tax on classification categories, industrial, ag, et cetera. So we'll be providing that back to council. We will be looking at a message again to clarify how property taxes work and an explanation to our citizens, whether that's a web or other venues, will determine the best ways of doing that. There was a question to follow up with the county on the ability to forward ballots to temporary addresses. We'll get clarification on that from the clerk's office. And then also have to be we'll talk with communications and legal on what we can actually get out there on an article that on the impact of consolidated elections for our citizens and what that means at the same time without lobbying for a vote either way. So those were the follow-up items. terms of communication items, just to finish up, we did have 13,312 people in attendance at the July 4th. So that was above our average, good turnout. And obviously our staff, Parks Recreation, ballpark staff, public safety, great job in really helping to manage the crowds there. So congratulations. And then as a reminder, we were trying to get on your calendars, fleet and equipment facility. We will be doing a ribbon cutting July 14th, 8:30 to 9:30. And that's near the Public Works Administration facility. But the 12,900 square feet facility is designed to last us for 15 years without having to do additional expansions, although we will have room on site to do that. And I also would say that the design construction, $2.8 million, we actually stayed on schedule, and it was about $65,000 under budget. If for any reason council's not available, we can do private tours. We'd be happy to really accommodate the needs of council. We had a very short window on this one. Short window is when you do the ribbon cutting, there's a point where you actually start working in there, then you start interfering, and it also looks used very quickly. So we want that pristine look, and there's really just a short couple of days we had a chance to get in there. So appreciate the accommodations by council. If it doesn't work, please let me know, and we'll get you out there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any inquiries from council? Okay, well, I'm going to just let you know, we're going to adjourn this meeting, and then you all know we are going into a special meeting. So this meeting is adjourned.